November 12th, 2001. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty was just released, and countless people popped the game into their PS2 consoles, and were met with an exciting mission where you play as Solid Snake on a tanker. We learn that Revolver Ocelot is stealing the Metal Gear Ray, and is seemingly possessed by Liquid Snake's arm. Yeah, Metal Gear Solid's weird. And you like it like that. After the cliffhanger, players expected to get back to Snake to see how he would survive that incident, get back to fighting Liquid, and save the world. But that's not what happened. Rather, we're introduced to...
The terrorists call themselves Sons of Liberty.
Sons of Liberty?
The name of their leader is Solid Snake.
The hero of Shadow Moses? So that's why you changed my code name.
Right, but he can't be the Solid Snake. He died 2 years ago on that tanker after he blew it sky high.
Could he have survived?
Not a chance.
It should come to as no surprise that I'd be talking about Raiden as a character. In case you guys hadn't noticed, whenever I talk about Metal Gear Rising, you guys seem to like it, and since I actually like to be positive on this channel, I think what better way to cap off these videos about Metal Gear Rising, we should talk about the main protagonist of the game, Raiden.
Хорошо, very good. But do not rest easy just yet, huh?
Of course, when you talk about Raiden, you just can't talk about Rising. No, no, no. You need to talk about Raiden in full. You need to talk about Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 4 at the same time. Why? Well, because before the onslaught of YouTubers who decided that, hey, this meme game is doing really well in the algorithm, let's talk about it, a lot of people didn't like Raiden's character in Metal Gear Rising. Hell, ever since Raiden was introduced in MGS2, the character has been very contentious in pop culture. You wouldn't believe how bad it was to hear people complain about Raiden's character design, where it came to the point where there was a joke in MGS3 where you could beat up a character that was a dead ringer for poor old saucy Jack. So today, we're gonna take some time, steal some brain cells, be controlled by the memes, and talk about the character. I'm MangaKamen, and welcome. So, spoilers from Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Rising, and I will expect some level of familiarity with this iconic series of games. I'll try to provide some context, but I'm not here to hold your hand because I don't want this video to be 20 hours long. The Manhattan Incident. April 29th, 2009. A terrorist group known as the Sons of Liberty took over the decontamination facility in the ocean known as the Big Shell, with nearly 30 hostages, including the 44th US president at the time. There was only one man for the job. Snake. I mean Raiden. Yeah, this scene unfortunately made a lot of people turn away from the character and the game as a whole, because you initially had this badass Solid Snake, who was almost ripped from the silver screen, even to the point where Kojima straight up ripped Snake Plissken's name as an alias for Snake in this game as well. It was something against the standard of Japanese action games with this grizzled war hero. And then you get this pretty boy with long white hair.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
This is my real hair, okay?
How could you do this to me, Kojima? What? Obviously, looking back on this and having played the game, you realize that Jack here isn't the pretty anime boy that your first impression lied to you about. I'm not gonna say that first impressions are important, they obviously are, but if you just look at my channel where I criticize Life is Strange and you see that I like Persona 5 based on my style, you might think I hate women and think Persona 5 is perfect. Writers seem to think that. There's more to people than just the surface level though, real or fictional. And once you peel back the veil, you'll see there's more to people than just the cover. But hey, we live in 2022. Echo chambers are a thing now, and anything I say will be cast into the void. It's almost like a certain game talked about this over 20 years ago.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
Lale lule lo, my friends.
Sorry, I don't speak Italian.
Raiden, at the start of the game, we're told that he's a soldier who's been going through VR training, and that he's confident that he can handle a mission like this. Granted, there was some hesitation since we learned that even the virtual reality missions didn't cover things such as C4 disposal. However, throughout the game, under the command of Colonel Campbell, with the support of Raiden's girlfriend, Rosemary, Raiden is forced to deal with a ton of situations and puts him under pressure.
I'm going to go in my pants. Raiden, my sympathies.
Some trials are worse than others. This probably won't be the most original take you've heard, since MSGS2 has been analyzed to hell and back by this point in time, but Raiden is a representation of the player, and the inability to be Solid Snake is actually very important to the game's plot and themes, which I think I need to provide some context. Since this isn't a video centered on Metal Gear Solid 1, I'm going to be butchering the themes into a digestible manner so you guys can have some context. So the major theme of Metal Gear Solid was that genes do not define a person's destiny, and the best ending of the game shows this where Snake and Meryl ride off in the sunrise from Shadow Moses. Liquid Snake is being defeated, save for his arm, and the prospect of Snake and Meryl hooking up after the events of the game and living happily ever after are looking good. How could you betray me, Kojima? However, Metal Gear Solid 2 takes this in a different direction and plays to the weaknesses of a sequel. More often than not, whenever you have a sequel to a popular piece of media, there tends to be a bit of an issue with repetition. Insert Pokemon series joke here. And why not? If it worked the first time, why not recycle character beats, plots, and structures to create more polished products with a different coat of paint? That's just logical business thinking. One of the major points of Metal Gear Solid 2 is that it's supposed to mirror the events of the Shadow Moses incident. And this wasn't done on accident. This was written into the plot that I'll get into a little bit later. We as humans tend to be very fickle, and the game plays on that. We want more of the same thing if it's good. It's in our natures to want it. And in our overindulged, content-filled culture of the day, we're constantly looking to get our fix. We're kind of junkies in that way if you think about it. It's part of the reason why you'll get so many reboots or sequels, series nowadays. It's because it works. Or it worked. Granted, the reason why they tend to fail nowadays is a misunderstanding of the original source material and why people gravitate to the series, but hey, what do I know? In any case, throughout Metal Gear Solid 2, Raiden is constantly being given orders, and this was due to the group known as the Patriots and the AI they created to control Raiden. The goal was to see if they can control someone, in this case Raiden, in extreme situations, and well, considering the events of the game, it is really possible to control people very easily. Players who continued through the game controlling Raiden were just as well as part of the experiment. After all, we're playing something that is designed to be more polished versions of MGS1 on a stronger console, just so we can experience the world of Metal Gear Solid again, and this proposes some interesting questions that not only we as the player need to think about, but Raiden as well. Are people so gullible? Do we truly have free will? Can we ever break out from this? Did Kojima just punk me? This is what I wanted, right? Now that I have effectively instilled a sense of existential crisis and dread into my viewers, let's get back to the MGS2 and Raiden's character. Later in the game, we learn Raiden has suppressed memories of his past. Near the end of the game, basically at the climax, we learn that the main antagonist of the game, Solid Snake, molded Raiden into a child soldier after killing his family to the point where Raiden was known as the White Devil and Jack the Ripper. The star of Solid is his small boy unit. You know, when you say that out loud, it has this really nasty connotation to it nowadays. Granted, we learn this while Raiden's strapped to a torture machine, completely naked, and then you escape naked. Look, the Metal Gear Solid series has a bit of a weird sense of humor, and I love it for that, but I'm not gonna act like this doesn't hamper the scene that came before it a little bit, where we learn the truth of Raiden's past. Now you may be wondering, how did Raiden forget this? Well, partially it's because it's a traumatic time in Raiden's life. He is a child soldier, and this is something that will come into play when we get to Raiden's character development for Mr. Lightning Bolt. But trauma isn't something that can be easily explained, as well as how some people deal with it. Now, I am not a psychologist. Disclaimer, I know. I'm just a nerd on the internet who loves making videos about a game that's over 2 decades old at this point, and somehow, some way, for some reason I cannot explain, people take me serious. For the most part. And with my vast knowledge of how to use the Google search engine, Suppressed trauma is essentially a survival mechanism to help people function in society. I don't know about you, but the stress of the battlefield for a little kid, you know, being shot at, killing people to survive, and who knows what other sorts of war crimes would qualify for that. Then again, I live in a world where people consider mean words to be traumatic experiences, so the concept has been watered down slightly in modern day times. Gee, I wonder if this is something that a game could have predicted a few years ago. There was another factor as to why Raiden's memories of his past were suppressed.
Nanomachine, son!
Yes, my friends, nanomachines were a thing well before the meme of Sandra Armstrong. It's been a consistent tool in the games, as early as MGS1. It's how the Foxdie virus was able to be spread through Snake's body, and it's what the Patriots put into Raiden's body in order to help suppress his memories. Of course, while you can suppress your terrible past, you'll still have some nasty effects. We're told that Raiden was a heavy drinker, and that he'd often get into fights. At times, he'll sleep in a room that's completely void of almost anything. Hell, we also learned that Rose, Raiden's girlfriend and the main support throughout the game, was a plant to keep an eye on him. But she did fall in love with Raiden, over the terrible King Kong movie that they keep bringing up, but hey, what do I know? And we're not halfway done with the crap that's piled on that happens in this game, but if you want more details on this matter, then check out my Metal Gear Rising retrospective where I talk about the other crazy shit that Raiden went through.
Come on.
I mean, when you got a woman who can't be shot with bullets, an actual vampire who doesn't seem to die, and a fat man on roller skates, you know you're dealing with some messed up crap here. Raiden's character in MGS2 initially came off as a bit of a joke. He was a pretty boy. He was what a lot of people would consider to be the anime-esque character. But much like how time will show the truth, Raiden's character was revealed to the world. Raiden was a young kid who was psychologically trained to be a murderer by Solidus Snake. One of the biggest themes of the game, and what I think is a recurring theme with Raiden throughout the 3 games we're going to be talking about today, is your past. Raiden's past as a child soldier is something that heavily weighs on him, and overcoming the trauma to get the job done. Was Raiden whiny in this game? Yes. Was he gullible? Yes. But that's the thing about Raiden's character. He's supposed to be a stand-in for us. We came to Metal Gear Solid 2 to be Solid Snake, that badass! And Raiden was trained to be like Solid Snake. However, we're not Snake. And neither is Raiden. Raiden as a character had his choices taken away, and even as the players, we are taking his choices away as well. Hell, you want Raiden to get pissed on? Oh, you can make him walk through that stream if you want. You want him to harass hostages? You can make him do that too. You want him to slip on bird poop? Hell yeah, you can make him do that! Raiden is a tool. That was a significant part of his character, that he'd be controlled by third-party actors for their own whims and such. And that includes you and me whenever we pick up this controller. And after crashing Arsenal Gear in Manhattan, a scene that was, you know, actually removed because it somehow had implications to the September 11th attacks in New York that only happened a couple months before this game came out. Yeah, that was kind of freaky with that development. Raiden kills Solidus, a man who was actually trying to destroy the Patriots. Granted, he was going to do that by detonating a hydrogen bomb over Manhattan to wipe out technology, so, pick your poison there, I guess. And thus, Raiden breaks free from his shackles, rejecting his role as a tool, and even tears off the dog tags that have the player's name on them. Raiden takes control of his life, not allowing the past and others to control him.
You weren't born poor. You've never been hungry. You don't know what it's like to fight, and steal, and kill just to survive.
But you did survive! Through sheer force of will, following your own set of rules. With your own 2 hands, you took back your life!
And as much as I want to keep talking about the bosses and the rest of the plot of Metal Gear Solid 2, we do need to move on and talk about the next stage of Raiden's character development.
Turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Don't worry, it's a game. It's a game just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
What are you talking about?
Before we talk about Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 4, we need to establish something. I talked about this briefly in my MGR retrospective, but since most of you watching this haven't actually watched that and it's been a few months, I think a refresher is necessary. By the way, go watch that retrospective. I put a lot of time and effort into it. Do it! Metal Gear Rising wasn't initially set out to be a new game. It was actually set to be a side game to the Metal Gear Solid series, to help explain how Raiden got to the point he was in MGS4. But due to a bunch of weird events and possibly Kojima smoking a bit too much with Norman Reedus, that's just a joke, don't take it serious, that's not what happened. And the game was eventually turned into the spectacle that it is. Which is good for me, because Metal Gear Solid 4, at the time, was to be considered the last game in the Metal Gear Solid franchise. There were naturally going to be questions that some people will want answers for. That's what Metal Gear Solid Rising was going to be. The game was supposed to talk about how Raiden became a cyborg between Metal Gear Solid 2 and 4, and that script is apparently still floating around in the void somewhere, and was also supposed to be apparently open world where Raiden could explore and essentially take the role of Assassin's Creed. Like I said, I think Kojima's been smoking a bit too much with Norman Reedus at this point, but until that script gets leaked or the actual game gets made, which I doubt either will happen, at this point we need to ignore that. I only bring it up to give some more context as to what I'm going to say next. During the events between Metal Gear Solid 2 and 4, Raiden became fascinated with high-frequency blades and studied Japanese swordsmanship. Seems like a good investment to me! As well as doing the extensive research necessary on AIs, and he got into a relationship with Rose. Although because of the memories of his past, he returned to drinking and had caused tension in their relationship to the point where he had to leave Rose behind. What didn't help was that Raiden was under the belief that his child, that Rose was carrying, died from a miscarriage, which, spoilers, that's not what happened, but we'll get to that mess later. We need to bring up Sonny. Who's Sonny, you may ask, as thousands of people wondered that question when playing/watching Metal Gear Rising videos, and wondered how a little girl could be in charge of a high-tech facility. Well, Sonny's a child of the Patriots, and was used as a bargaining chip to use her mother to help Raiden during the Big Shell incident. In case you're wondering, since I didn't bring it up, she was a ninja, even though she's Russian, I believe.
A woman. Show your face.
You ain't getting jack on me, yo!
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, because if Raiden died, well, the nanomachines that the Patriots injected into Sonny would kill her, and thus her mother was supposed to help Raiden out as a ninja. Also, the Patriots experimented on Sonny's brain when she was an infant, and became a prodigy in robotics, engineering, and computer science. So yeah, hope you enjoy that context of Metal Gear Rising for people who didn't bother playing the past game. Anyway, Raiden goes to save Sonny and then drops her off to Snake and his partner Otacon, the two self-inserts of Kojima himself, and they basically become a pair of dads for the game. As for why Raiden did this, well, not only because was Sonny being used as a tool and was tied to him in a nanomachine way, but also because he made a deal with a person named Big Mama who provided him with the assistance and the location of Sonny, all for the low cost of the location of Big Boss's body, which is a can of worms in of itself, and we're already talking about 2 pages worth into this backstory, so you guys can keep up with what I'm talking about. The last thing you need to know is that Raiden was captured by the Patriots during the mission to get Big Boss's body back, and they experiment on Raiden, giving him the cybernetic body. Granted, after dealing with all of that, then you can only imagine that Raiden's character would drastically change. Raiden became more brooding, more monstrous looking, more badass, and a lot of people enjoy that. And if you do, that's perfectly fine, but there was something that felt like a kick to the gut to Raiden's character. I feel that, though, the reason why these changes were made was because of a backlash to Raiden MGS2, almost like a backpedal to the fans who didn't like Raiden, so they made him cool. Granted, this is just me giving a surface level aspect, and only a part of me thinks that. The other part is, you know, drunk on bourbon, but it's also that it plays the conventions that a little Metal Gear Solid games having cybernetic ninja characters in them plays to. But I still think that they got Raiden to this point is a bit too much. Tragedy is a necessary component for characters, especially for someone like Raiden who's already got a tragic life going on. But to me, it felt like Raiden was a bit too simplified for Metal Gear Solid 4. After all, if you didn't know the backstory that I clumsily gave you when you actually completed MGS2, you'd think it's strange that Raiden, who went from a character who broke from the shackles of being controlled and wanted to craft his own future, as a new beginning for him, and that's just slapdashed. Granted, MGS4 was a game that wasn't actually supposed to be made under Kojima because Kojima wanted to wrap up the series in 3, but thanks to some genius fans and death threats, MGS4 is now this weird amalgamation of being the finale to Metal Gear series as well as being a love letter to it. I mean, it's from a loved one who likes to burn you with cigarettes, but still a love letter from the guy. You may notice that I haven't gone too much in depth with the Metal Gear Solid 4 events, and that's not to say they aren't important, like Raiden stopping a huge ship with a cyborg body. But here's the thing, Raiden is not the main character of the game. Yes, he does get scenes, but most of the focus is on Solid Snake and his wrinkly ass. Obviously, when you're not the main character in a piece of media, you typically don't get a lot of development, let alone more development than the main character. Unless you're in Ruby.
No one said that you should think.
But there is an aspect of Raiden's development in this, and that's Rose's fake relationship to Roy Campbell. and how Rose and Roy lied to Raiden about the death of his own son. Yeah! Warning, you're about to get a load of salt poured down your throat, so open up wide, boys and girls! So yeah, as a means to protect Rose and Raiden's son, Roy offered to be Rose's fake husband, and the two decided to lie to Raiden about the status of his kid, otherwise the Patriots would go after the kid to get to Raiden. At the end of the game, when the Patriots are destroyed, Raiden gets his arms back, and he forgives Rose and can finally be a family together. Raiden's done running again, yay!
Like a scene from Beauty and the Beast.
But when you really think about it, it's really disgusting and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, I'm gonna be straight up, you're gonna hear an opinion you probably heard from Steak Bentley in his video on Metal Gear Solid 4, since it's one I agree with, and want to put in my own words, and oh hey, he's actually alive. Huh, he actually made a video on Adventure Brothers. You know, it's good to see that he's alive and not, you know, a corpse. But yeah, remember at the beginning of this section when I gave you all that context about Raiden slowly slipping back into his alcoholism and his PTSD in the in-between events of the games? Yeah, now top that off with Roy coming up to Rose with this banger of idea. So, here's the plan. We're gonna let Raiden think his kid is dead, and you're gonna pretend to not love him anymore, and we'll enter a fake marriage. This is to protect you and your kid from the Patriots. Sounds good to me! But this doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, why would Rose be out of the line of sight of the Patriots just because she's not in a relationship with Raiden? Isn't the fact that she's got a connection to Solid Snake in two ways, being in direct contact and being associated with Roy Campbell, not coming to play at all? And it's obvious that Raiden still has feelings for Rose. So the Patriots could still possibly use Rose as a bargaining chip against Raiden. Even then, why can't Raiden know that his kid's alive? Even after the Patriots moved his body and turned him into a cyborg, it's not like Raiden was under their influence. Hell, he was actually changed thanks to Doctor! Turn off my pain inhibitors! Okay. It just comes off as jarring to me, and the fact that we get this storybook happy ending just kind of rubs salt in the wound as well. I'm not saying this isn't a terrible thing for Raiden's character. Hell, the fact he's willing to forgive Rose for this disgusting behavior is a key to his character, especially considering all the shit he goes through. And I don't think Rose is a terrible character, I just think she's kind of stupid. I mean, I thought that in Metal Gear Solid 2 when she kept on bringing up relationship stuff while, you know, Raiden's putting his life in danger, trying to defuse bombs and dealing with fat men on roller skates. But this still doesn't sit right with me with how bad Rose gaslit Raiden. But hey, don't let me ruin this happy ending. I know a lot of people like this ending, but I don't, and if this was the end for Raiden's character, while I wouldn't like it, I guess I could accept it. It's just repeating the whole thing from Metal Gear Solid 2, where Raiden has this so-called happy good ending coming up. I just wish there was a game where Raiden's character be taken in a new direction, where he can be challenged by charismatic characters who act as somewhat reflections of Raiden's past, and how it could have looked for Raiden had he not broken from his shackles. Oh, and have some kick-ass tunes playing in the background. You know, I've actually heard a lot of people dislike Rising for what it did to Raiden's character, and how it apparently ruined him. Obviously, if you've seen my channel, you know I disagree with that, and I think it's a little bull, but hey, you can have that opinion. I just disagree with it. And I'm going to explain why. When you look at Raiden's character, you can see that there's something about him that translates through the past couple games. PTSD and relapse. If there's something that I point out through the previous sections is that Raiden had a tendency to break down into drowning himself into alcohol and getting into fights with random people. It happened before in MGS2, it happened before MGS4, so who's to say it wouldn't happen again? The stuff that Raiden went through just doesn't disappear. Sure, you can't control it, but those scars of the past will remain. Even more so when your entire body has been essentially replaced with machine parts, and you're now stuck using WD-40 to make sure you don't squeak when you move. I don't believe that just because Raiden has a family now that he wouldn't just slip back into a spiral depression. Why would it work this time? There's a quote that Metal Gear Solid likes to tote around. A soldier's mind never leaves the battlefield. Raiden at this point in mind, body, and even soul, he's a soldier, whether he likes it or not. And throughout Rising, Raiden faces off against some very memorable characters who constantly challenge him and make Raiden question himself. Raiden is in his element here, and when facing off against the winds of destruction, it's like looking into a mirror of what he could have been. So whenever Raiden fights against them, Raiden is essentially fighting against an aspect of his past. If you haven't seen my Metal Gear Rising Brilliant Bosses videos, which you totally should, you know I spent a lot of time explaining how the bosses challenge Raiden's character, most notable being Blade Wolf, Jetstream Sam, and obviously
making the mother of all omelets here, Jack. Can't fret over every egg.
Each of them represent a part of Raiden's life. Blade Wolf was essentially what Raiden was, a tool only to be used and discarded when they outlived their usefulness, something that Raiden himself had to deal with. Throw in the fact that Raiden had a hatred for AI, the AI would constantly use him, and showing he was willing to help Blade Wolf gain his freedom as well as learn more about AIs from the dog, it shows that Raiden was willing to grow as a person and not just let his past control his emotions and decisions for the future. Sam is the rival character of the game. It should be obvious since the two use similar weapons and have that badass western style duel that I won't shut up about. God, I love that tumbleweed! Sam is the character who breaks Raiden out of his preconceived notions at the beginning of the game by taking his eye and slicing his arm off. In addition, Sam is the character that challenges Raiden's views on killing for the sake of justice. How the men Raiden kills made their choices on the battlefield, but they have their fears being inhibited by nanomachines. Sounds familiar, don't it? Sam is also the only one of destruction that Raiden doesn't slice into chunky salsa. The best thing about these two is they make each other question each other's motives. That's what makes a great rivalry, and maybe when I make a video about rivals, I'll go more in depth with these two specifically. And then there's Armstrong.
Don't fuck with this, Senator!
It's essentially a fight between two ideologies. Two men fighting to the death, both of them understanding the similarities between their personal philosophies, and the two trading blows, understanding their motivations with each smack of their fists and swords. And yet, ironically, it's their motivations that propel them to fight against each other. And just like the game itself talks about memes being passed on to others, it's why when you kill Armstrong, you see him fall in place of Raiden's shadow, showing that Raiden adopted a part of Armstrong's motivation. Then again, you can also say that Raiden absorbed it, since whenever he kills an enemy, he breaks their spine to heal themselves and absorbs the nanomachines within them. That's what Raiden does with Armstrong's heart too. Now, I could just repeat what I said about the other bosses that affect Raiden as a character, but I already did that in my video, and I mean, I don't know. I don't want to repeat myself too much, more than I already do. So, let's talk about another aspect.
What are you saying? I'm saying Jack is back.
This is probably the most contentious scene in the game, at least to the people who actually bothered to understand Raiden's character and didn't just hop onto the bandwagon of Rising's popularity in the last couple months. I've seen people bring up how Raiden's character development was slashed because of this, or how it's weaponizing trauma, or that he's succumbing to Solidus's brainwashing again, and honestly, if you feel that way, well, nothing I say is going to change your mind on that. I've seen these people argue and they will find anything to explain why you're wrong in their points. To me, I disagree with all that. Not only does it ignore that Raiden doesn't allow his past to control him, rather, Raiden does utilize his past, and not his trauma. After all, he doesn't remain his Ripper persona, he's still in control, all he admits is that he enjoys killing. Which, I know, sounds bad, but then again, when you have to do it all the time, you kinda get used to it, I suppose, which is sad to say. Raiden is well aware of how broken he is, and he uses that to make sure World Marshal can never create another Jack the Ripper. This also ignores the bloody point of Armstrong's final words.
Your dream dies with you. Oh, maybe not. You've guaranteed the status quo will go on. For a while longer, at least. War will continue as an institution, as an industry. Men will fight for reasons they don't understand. Causes they don't believe in. But at least I'll leave a worthy successor. You, Jack. You carve your own path. Use whatever methods you see fit. You don't let legal bullshit get in the way. And if it costs a few lives, so be it. Deep inside, we're kindred spirits. You and I.
It's called a Pyrrhic victory, a victory that comes at a great cost, perhaps making it not even worth the ideal. Because, at the end of the day, what did Raiden accomplish? He took down World Marshal and Armstrong's plans, but the war economy is still effed up. The kids whose brains are scooped out are safe, but they still lack an actual physical body. And Raiden's killed how many people during this event? That's kind of the point that people seem to forget, that even though there was a great tragedy being prevented, Raiden's actions still had consequences, and he comes to terms to accepting that. He's not falling back into Solace's mind control, he's not ignoring his development, he's not weaponizing his trauma. He's just coming to terms to the darker side of his personality and past and unlocking the blockers that allow him to access his true power. It's something that Raiden expresses he's not happy with, but he needs it in order to complete his mission. It's clear the fact that Raiden isn't completely gone to Jack the Ripper mode all the time, that this isn't walking back his character development. The worst he ever does to his support team is just be a snarky asshole. Hell, considering the fact that Sam, the guy who took his eye and arm, was a boss after awakening Jack the Ripper, he was killed in a more dignified manner and kept in one piece. It should be a testament that Raiden is capable of controlling the Ripper. It's also why we have this line.
I said my sword was a tool of justice. Not used in anger. Not used for vengeance. But now I'm not so sure. And besides, this isn't my sword.
Raiden used his blade as a means of preserving justice, but when his sword was broken by Armstrong and he wields Sam's Murasama, which is not his sword, as well as the high tension in the fight against Armstrong, his anger is directed at one force: Armstrong himself. To me, this is Raiden accepting his past, making peace with it, saying that the Ripper in his past is just a means of ignoring what he actually did. It's why Raiden kept on falling back into his bad habits, because he wasn't confronting Jack the Ripper. He wasn't controlling that past. Raiden can be the Ripper, but he can be better. He can take the things that made him into a tool in the first place and turn that into a tool for justice. Raiden isn't defined by his past, rather he's actively defining it himself. Raiden understands that this kind of trauma doesn't just go away, which is what Metal Gear Solid 4 did. Raiden accepts that he's a man on the battlefield. He's hardwired to be violent, and that's not something that can easily go away. He uses that violence to fight for his ideals, which is to prevent many Jack the Rippers from being born into the world, i.e. preventing child soldiers from becoming what he was when he was younger. That to me is an interesting direction to take Raiden's character than to just have Raiden become a family man and ignore how terrible his past was, when he's had a history of relapse because of him not addressing his trauma. I don't think Rising ruins the ending of MGS4. If anything, it's in line with how the Metal Gear Solid series has treated Raiden's character. Hell, did everyone think that after the Patriots were destroyed that everything would be sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows? That's not how reality works! If it did, then Raiden wouldn't have to deal with the relapse before Metal Gear Solid 4. But hey, I'm just a nerd on the internet. What do I know? To put it simply, Raiden is a very deep character, deeper than this video can go into without, making it hours long. As while I do like the Metal Gear Solid series, and Rising of course, that's not what my channel is about. As much as I would want it to be, I do want to talk about other topics and games. I do hold a lot of respect for Metal Gear Rising. It's a game that I play at least once a year, and it's a game that has helped me get through some tough times in my life. In times of sorrow, anger, and depression. Whenever I hear this game's music and the amazing characterization that I watch, it's something that always puts a smile on my face. Raiden as a character is someone that I relate to. He's someone that I appreciate. And he's a character whose story I've followed for years as I've played these games. And I've barely scratched the surface of this game series. And who knows, maybe I'll talk about it down the line. And if you guys want me to talk more about this, then just leave a comment saying rules of nature. I do want to talk more about games in a more positive light. I want to be more positive on this channel, and hopefully I can. I hope I can learn from Raiden, where I can accept that even though I have negative aspects of myself, that I can use that to become a better person, to become stronger. And I hope you guys join me on that journey. I'm MangaKamen, and thank you for watching.
I understand. But then,
What will you do?
I've got my own war to fight.